Dr. Sam Kamau, who are both governance experts. We're talking about this new change of heart from Jubilee, and the introduction of Jubilee, or what we're seeing now, Jubilee being an all-encompassing party. Is it likely to gain traction in swing vote areas, Dr. Kamau?
Well, looking at 2013, where Jubilee was a coalition of several parties, but especially two major parties, I think trying to consolidate different political parties together, there's still the sense in which we tend to view political parties in terms of the leaders, the top leaders of those political parties, and the followers tend to associate more with those ones. We know there are some political parties that folded that were from other regions that came under the Jubilee family, and they have not necessarily found so much prominence, that is the leaders from those other regions. But there's a sense in which they are trying to craft Jubilee as a national party, a nationwide party that has support across. And there's a sense in which, since in the upcoming elections, we are going basically to have Jubilee versus NASA, that is at the top, and therefore across the country people are expected, of course, to vote, even if there are some other independent candidates running for the presidency. We know that these are the two key players, and therefore there is a sense in which people will identify with either side of the coalition from across different places in the country. But we still know Jubilee has its strongholds, which are identifiable, that is the wider Mount Kenya region and the Rift Valley, and of course they are gaining ground in some other places. But we also know that in NASA, for example, we have the principals and they come from specific regions. But if you combine all of them together, within NASA and Jubilee in the top leadership, there are only five of the biggest communities are represented at the very top level. Now there are other communities in the entire country that definitely will have to find accommodation one way or the other, and that is why I think the challenge for the two formations is how they sell their agenda and how they message or send their message to these particular, or especially the smaller communities, the marginalized communities, the northern frontier area, those places. Those will be able to sell their message to them in a way that it can resonate with the issues that they feel are important to them. For example, earlier I told for Ukambani, it is water. There are some biting issues, burning issues there. If you go, for example, if it is the northern frontier, again the northeastern region, there are certain issues that are very close to their heart. If Jubilee or NASA is able to package itself and sell its message, they are definitely likely to gain ground in those particular areas.
And to you, Mutia, are they likely now to make significant inroads in opposition territories?
They have already done so, Lillian. Take an example of the coastal region. At some point, Jubilee had actually pitched tent literally at the coast, and by so doing, they were actually showcasing the kind of attachment that they have at the coast. And the coast tradition has been perceived as a swing zone, and they were actually, Jubilee was out to ensure that they capitalize on various fallouts here and there, by going through the so-called project-oriented sort of approach at the coast. And they seemed at some point to have got it right, until lately when they lost the grip at the coast and they started to backtrack a little bit. If they had really, continued the same steam, with the same steam at the coast, they should have really consolidated the coast, or they could have really taken coast as a Jubilee zone. But again, it's not yet late, because the electioneering period in fact starts proper from 28th of this month all the way to August 8th, so there's still a lot of time. But again, if you look at also Ukambani, Jubilee has really done a lot of inroads. Anybody dismissing Jubilee in Ukambani, I think will be making a very grievous political mistake, because if you look at the personalities in terms of members of parliament who voted from their mainstream political parties, in the names of the Mutambos, Kisoi Munyaos were there, the member for Kilome was also there, boycotted to Jubilee. They really made a big statement that with some sort of arrangement, Jubilee can collect some few votes here and there. And also the Kisii zone, Nairobi as well. These are some of these are some of the areas that we will be watching very closely in terms of how they are going to gravitate towards Jubilee. There's also the Western Zone, where, you know, even the issue of Ken Lusaka Fording Shop to work closely with the Jubilee, the issue of even the IEBC chair coming from Western Kenya is not a small thing, Lillian. And these are some of the reasons why, you know, Jubilee will be able to pick some pockets of votes from these so-called NASA strong zones also.
Yeah. So, Dr. Kamau, Jubilee seems to have been forced back to the drawing board. Let's talk about the fact that the president and his deputy previously had a non-committal stance towards small parties that had said they were supporting Jubilee, but which refused to fold up and become part of the ruling coalition, and the fact that they must now, in a very short time, because we're only 3 months away to the polls, convince some of these parties to fold up and join them.
I think what we're likely to see, Lillian, because Jubilee, like I've consistently mentioned, that this will be a closely contested election. Jubilee would, of course, want to show that they have support across the country. And I think one of the issues, of course, is if you look at their structure at the top that seems just to have the president and his deputy, they may want to expand that in terms of forming the campaign teams. And this is where the smaller parties perhaps could find accommodation, or even people who folded up their parties to join the Jubilee family. They could, for example, identify strong or key persons in some of these so-called opposition strongholds from the coast, for example, from Western. They could also even go for friendly areas like the Northeastern, expand the campaign team to look like it is more representative. There's a sense in which, of course, NASA at the top, because of having 5 principles, it appears like it represents a bigger section of the country, and Jubilee is likely to do that. So by bringing on board the smaller parties and reconstituting its structure at the top to show that it accommodates people from other regions outside the 2 traditional strongholds for Jubilee, is likely to make our significant mileage in that sense.
And still on this, Dr. Mutia, even as Jubilee reaches out to these smaller parties, you know, looking at the just concluded party primary, suspicions over the party ticket have also led to defections in Jubilee strongholds to smaller friendly parties, thereby strengthening these smaller parties. How does that affect Jubilee's chances at the polls?
Lillian, first of all, it should be on record that there's no single candidate who could have left from a political party after nominations to associate himself or herself with another political party, whether small or big. For instance, if it's somebody was lost from a Jubilee primary, the only choice, and I'm saying this again, the only alternative this person could have is to run as an independent candidate. But somebody, you know, saying that he went to another smaller party after losing from nominations, I think that's somebody who does not know what the electoral laws are saying. But again, we are also seeing the rise in terms of numbers for independent candidates coming into foreplay. And the reason why they are coming to the foreplay is to make a statement that as much as we have used some reasonable amount of resources campaigning for ourselves and eventually lost through the primaries, we want to showcase that we can go all the way to the ballot and perhaps shake the formation as it is. But again, how they are going to play within those traditional political party zones is something very interesting, because as much as we want to be told they are independent candidates, Lillian, you find that in Central, for instance, they will be saying they are independent candidates, but at the same time inclining towards President Uhuru Kenyatta. In a NASA strongholds, they will be going as independent candidates, but at the same time telling the potential electorate voters that, look here, I'm an independent candidate, but I'm supporting Baba. So that kills the whole essence of being independent, because as much as they want to be independent, they are pretty alive, politically speaking, that the wave of the land within that political context is pretty, you know, so much gravitated towards the political party of that particular region, Lillian.
We're talking to Brian Mutia and Dr. Sam Kamau, both governance experts on Citizen Extra. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're now talking the day's latest trends with Brian Okoth here with me in studio. Brian, what's up?
on